Titanic is a 1997 American epic romance and disaster film directed, written, produced, and co-edited by James Cameron. Incorporating both historical and fictionalized aspects, it is based on accounts of the sinking of the RMS Titanic and stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet as members of different social classes who fall in love aboard the ship during its ill-fated maiden voyage. Also starring are Billy Zane, Kathy Bates, Frances Fisher, Gloria Stewart, Bernard Hill, Jonathan Hyde, Victor Garber, and Bill Paxton. Cameron's inspiration for the film came from his fascination with shipwrecks. He felt a love story interspersed with the human loss would be essential to convey the emotional impact of the disaster. Production began on September 1, 1995. When Cameron shot footage of the actual Titanic wreck. The modern scenes on the research vessel were shot on board the academic Mstislav Keldysh, which Cameron had used as a base when filming the wreck. Scale models, computer-generated imagery, and a reconstruction of the Titanic built at Baja Studios were used to recreate the sinking. The film was co-financed by Paramount Pictures and 20th Century Fox. The former handled distribution in North America while the latter released the film internationally. It was the most expensive film ever made at the time, with a production budget of $200 million. Upon its release on December 19, 1997, Titanic achieved significant critical and commercial success, and then received numerous accolades. Nominated for 14 Academy Awards, it tied All About Eve for the most Oscar nominations, and won 11, including the awards for Best Picture and Best Director, tying Ben-Hur for the most Oscars won by a single film. With an initial worldwide gross of over $1.84 billion, Titanic was the first film to reach the billion-dollar mark. It remained the highest-grossing film of all time until another Cameron film, Avatar, surpassed it in 2010. A 3D version of Titanic, released on April 4, 2012, to commemorate the centennial of the sinking, earned it an additional $343.6 million worldwide, pushing the film's worldwide total to $2.195 billion and making it the second film to gross more than $2 billion worldwide. In 2017, the film was re-released for its 20th anniversary and was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Plot. In 1996, aboard the research vessel academic Mstislav Keldysh, Brock Lovett and his team search the wreck of RMS Titanic. They recover a safe they hope contains a necklace with a large diamond known as the Heart of the Ocean. Instead, they only find a drawing of a young nude woman wearing the necklace. The sketch is dated April 14, 1912, the same day the Titanic struck the iceberg that caused it to sink. Rose Dawson Calvert, the woman in the drawing, is brought aboard Keldysh. She recounts her experiences aboard Titanic. In 1912 Southampton, 17-year-old Rose DeWitt Bukater, her wealthy fiancé Caledon Cal Hockley, and Rose's widowed mother, Ruth, board the Titanic. Ruth emphasizes that Rose's marriage to Cal will resolve the family's financial problems and maintain their upper-class status. Meanwhile, Jack Dawson, a poor young artist, wins a third-class Titanic ticket in a poker game. After setting sail, Rose, distraught over her loveless engagement, climbs over the stern railing, intending to jump overboard. Jack appears and coaxes her back onto the deck. The two develop a tentative friendship, but when Cal and Ruth strongly object, Rose acquiesces and discourages Jack's attention. She soon realizes she has feelings for Jack. Rose brings Jack to her stateroom and pays him a coin to sketch her nude, wearing only the Heart of the Ocean necklace. They later evade Cal's servant, Lovejoy, and have sex in a Renault town car inside the cargo hold. On the forward deck, they witness the ship's collision with an iceberg and overhear its officers and builder discussing the serious situation. Cal discovers Jack's sketch and Rose's insulting note left inside his safe, along with the necklace. When Jack and Rose return to warn the others about the collision, Cal has Lovejoy slip the necklace into Jack's pocket to frame him for theft. Jack is then confined in the Master-at-Arms office. Cal then puts the necklace into his own overcoat pocket. With the ship sinking, Rose flees Cal and her mother, who has boarded a lifeboat. Rose finds and frees Jack, and they barely make it back to the boat deck. Cal and Jack urge Rose to board a lifeboat. Having arranged to save himself, Cal falsely claims he can get Jack safely off the ship. As her lifeboat is lowered, Rose, unable to abandon Jack, jumps back on board. Cal grabs Lovejoy's pistol and chases Rose and Jack into the flooding first-class dining saloon. They get away, and Cal realizes that he gave his coat, and consequently the necklace, to Rose. He later boards a lifeboat posing as a lost child's father. Jack and Rose return to the boat deck. The lifeboats have departed and the ship's stern is rising as the flooded bow sinks. As passengers fall to their deaths, Jack and Rose desperately cling to the stern rail. The upended ship breaks in half and the bow section dives downward. The remaining stern slams back onto the ocean, then upends again before it, too, sinks. In the freezing water, Jack helps Rose onto a wooden panel buoyant enough for only one person and makes her promise to survive. Jack dies of hypothermia, and Rose is saved by a returning lifeboat, keeping her promise. The RMS Carpathia rescues the survivors. Rose avoids Cal by hiding among the steerage passengers and gives her name as Rose Dawson. Still wearing Cal's overcoat, she discovers the necklace tucked inside the pocket. In the present, Rose says she later heard that Cal committed suicide after losing his fortune in the Wall Street crash of 1929. Lovett abandons his search after hearing Rose's story. Alone on the stern of Keldysh, Rose takes out the heart of the ocean, which has been in her possession all along, and drops it into the sea over the wreck site. While she is seemingly asleep in her bed, her photos on the dresser depict a life of freedom and adventure inspired by her early conversations with Jack. A young Rose reunites with Jack at Titanic's grand staircase, applauded by those who died on the ship. Cast. Fictional characters. Leonardo DiCaprio as Jack Dawson. Cameron said he needed the cast to feel they were really on the Titanic, to relieve its liveliness, and to take that energy and give it to Jack, an artist who is able to have his heart soar. Jack is portrayed as an itinerant, poor orphan from Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, who has traveled the world, including Paris. He wins 2 third-class tickets for the Titanic in a poker game and travels with his friend Fabrizio. He is attracted to Rose at first sight. Her fiancé's invitation to dine with them the next evening enables Jack to mix with the first-class passengers for a night. Though established actors like Matthew McConaughey, Chris O'Donnell, Billy Crudup, and Stephen Dorff were considered, Cameron felt they were too old for the part of a 20-year-old. Tom Cruise was interested, but his asking price was too high. Cameron considered Jared Leto for the role, but Leto refused to audition. Jeremy Sisto did a series of screen tests with Winslet and 3 other actresses vying for the role of Rose. DiCaprio, 21 years old at the time, was brought to Cameron's attention by casting director Molly Finn. Initially, he did not want the role and refused to read his first romantic scene. Cameron said, "He read it once, then started goofing around, and I could never get him to focus on it again. But for one split second, a shaft of light came down from the heavens and lit up the forest." Cameron strongly believed in DiCaprio's acting ability and told him, "Look, I'm not going to make this guy brooding and neurotic. I'm not going to give him a tic and a limp and all the things you want." Cameron envisioned the character as a James Stewart type. Although Jack Dawson was a fictional character, in Fairview Cemetery in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where 121 victims are buried, there is a grave labeled J. Dawson. The real J. Dawson was Joseph Dawson, a trimmer in the engine room. It wasn't until after the movie came out that we found out that there was a J. Dawson gravestone, said the film's producer, John Landau, in an interview. Kate Winslet as Rose DeWitt Bukater. Cameron said Winslet had the thing that you look for and that there was a quality in her face, in her eyes, that he just knew people would be ready to go the distance with her. Rose is a 17-year-old girl, originally from Philadelphia, who is forced into an engagement to 30-year-old Cal Hockley so she and her mother, Ruth, can maintain their high-class status after her father's death had left the family debt-ridden. Rose boards the RMS Titanic with Cal and Ruth, as a first-class passenger, and meets Jack. Winslet said of her character, "She has got a lot to give, and she's got a very open heart. And she wants to explore and adventure the world, but that's not going to happen." Gwyneth Paltrow, Winona Ryder, Claire Danes, Gabrielle Anwar, and Reese Witherspoon had been considered for the role. When they turned it down, Winslet campaigned heavily for the role. She sent Cameron daily notes from England, which led Cameron to invite her to Hollywood for auditions. As with DiCaprio, casting director Molly Finn originally brought her to Cameron's attention. When looking for a Rose, Cameron described the character as an Audrey Hepburn type and was initially uncertain about casting Winslet even after her screen test impressed him. After she screen tested with DiCaprio, Winslet was so thoroughly impressed with him, that she whispered to Cameron, "He's great. Even if you don't pick me, pick him." Winslet sent Cameron a single rose with a card signed, "From your Rose," and lobbied him by phone. "You don't understand," she pleaded one day when she reached him by mobile phone in his Humvee. "I am Rose. I don't know why you're even seeing anyone else." Her persistence, as well as her talent, eventually convinced him to cast her in the role. Billy Zane as Caledon Hockley. Caledon is Rose's arrogant and snobbish 30-year-old fiancé, who is the heir to a Pittsburgh steel fortune. He becomes increasingly embarrassed by, jealous of, and cruel about Rose's affection for Jack. The part was originally offered to Matthew McConaughey, and Rob Lowe has also gone on the record as having pursued it. Frances Fisher as Ruth DeWitt Bukater, Rose's widowed mother, who arranges her daughter's engagement to Cal to maintain her family's high society status. Like many aristocratic passengers portrayed in the film, her disposition is elitist and frivolous. She loves her daughter but believes that social position is more important than having a loving marriage. She strongly dislikes Jack, even though he saved her daughter's life. Gloria Stewart as Rose Dawson Calvert. Rose narrates the film in a modern-day framing device. Cameron stated, "In order to see the present and the past, I decided to create a fictional survivor who is 101 years, and she connects us in a way through history." The 100-year-old Rose gives Lovett information regarding the heart of the ocean after he discovers a nude drawing of her in the wreck. She shares the story of her time aboard the ship, and speaks about her relationship with Jack for the first time since the sinking. At 87, Stewart had to be made up to look older for the role. Of casting Stewart, Cameron stated, "My casting director found her. She was sent out on a mission to find retired actresses from the golden age of the 30s and 40s. Cameron said that he did not know who Stewart was, and Fay Wray was also considered for the role. But was just so into it, and so lucid, and had such a great spirit. And I saw the connection between her spirit and spirit," stated Cameron. "I saw this joie de vivre in both of them, that I thought the audience would be able to make that cognitive leap that it's the same person." Bill Paxton as Brock Lovett, a treasure hunter looking for the heart of the ocean in the wreck of the Titanic in the present. Time and funding for his expedition are running out. He later reflects at the film's conclusion that, despite thinking about Titanic for 3 years, he has never understood it until he hears Rose's story. Susie Amos as Lizzie Calvert, Rose's granddaughter, who accompanies her when she visits Lovett on the ship and learns of her grandmother's romantic past with Jack Dawson. Danny Nucci as Fabrizio, Jack's Italian best friend, who boards the RMS Titanic with him after Jack wins 2 tickets in a poker game. Fabrizio does not board a lifeboat when the Titanic sinks and is killed when one of the ship's funnels breaks and crashes into the water, crushing him and several other passengers to death. David Warner as Spicer Lovejoy, an ex-Pinkerton constable. Lovejoy is Cal's English valet and bodyguard, who keeps an eye on Rose and is suspicious about the circumstances surrounding Jack rescuing her. He dies when the Titanic splits in half, causing him to fall into a massive opening. Warner had appeared in the 1979 TV miniseries SOS Titanic. Jason Barry as Tommy Ryan, an Irish third-class passenger who befriends Jack and Fabrizio. Tommy is killed when he is accidentally pushed forward and shot by a panicked First Officer Murdoch. Historical characters. Although not intended to be an entirely accurate depiction of events, the film includes portrayals of several historical figures. Kathy Bates as Margaret Molly Brown. Brown is looked down upon by other first-class women, including Ruth, as vulgar and new money. She is friendly to Jack and lends him a suit of evening clothes when he is invited to dinner in the first-class dining saloon. She was dubbed the unsinkable Molly Brown by historians because, with the support of other women, she commandeered Lifeboat 6 from Quartermaster Robert Hickens. Some aspects of this altercation are portrayed in Cameron's film. Victor Garber as Thomas Andrews, the ship's builder. Andrews is portrayed as a kind, decent man who is modest about his grand achievement. After the collision, he tries to convince the others, particularly Ismay, that it is a mathematical certainty that the ship will sink. He is depicted during the sinking of the ship as standing next to the clock in the first-class smoking room, lamenting his failure to build a strong and safe ship. Although this has become one of the most famous legends of the sinking of the Titanic, this story, which was published in a 1912 book and therefore perpetuated, came from John Stewart, a steward on the ship who in fact left the ship in boat number 15 at approximately 1:40 a.m. There were testimonies of sightings of Andrews after that moment. It appears that Andrews stayed in the smoking room for some time to gather his thoughts, then he continued assisting with the evacuation. Another reported sighting was of Andrews frantically throwing deck chairs into the ocean for passengers to use as floating devices. Andrews was last seen leaving the ship at the last moment. Bernard Hill as Captain Edward John Smith. Smith planned to make the Titanic his final voyage before retiring. He retreats into the wheelhouse on the bridge as the ship sinks, dying when the windows implode from the water whilst he clings to the ship's wheel. There are conflicting accounts as to whether he died in this manner or later froze to death in the water near the capsized collapsible lifeboat B. Jonathan Hyde as J. Bruce Ismay, White Star Line's ignorant, boorish managing director, who influences Captain Smith to go faster with the prospect of an earlier arrival in New York and favorable press attention. While this action appears in popular portrayals of the disaster, it is unsupported by evidence. After the collision, he struggles to comprehend that his unsinkable ship is doomed. Ismay later boards Collapsible C just before it is lowered. He was branded a coward by the press and public for surviving the disaster while many women and children had drowned. Eric Braeden as John Jacob Astor IV, a first-class passenger whom Rose calls the richest man on the ship. The film depicts Astor and his 18-year-old wife Madeline as being introduced to Jack by Rose in the first-class dining saloon. During the introduction, Astor asks if Jack is connected to the Boston Dawsons, a question Jack deflects by saying that he is instead affiliated with the Chippewa Falls Dawsons. Astor is last seen as the grand staircase glass dome implodes and water surges in. Bernard Fox as Colonel Archibald Gracie. 4. The film depicts Gracie making a comment to Cal that women and machinery don't mix, and congratulating Jack for saving Rose from falling off the ship, though he is unaware that it was a suicide attempt. He is later seen offering to lead Jack and Rose to the remaining lifeboats during the sinking. Fox had portrayed Frederick Fleet in the 1958 film A Night to Remember. Michael Ensign as Benjamin Guggenheim, a mining magnate traveling in first class. He shows off his French mistress Madame Aubert to his fellow passengers while his wife and 3 daughters wait for him at home. When Jack joins the other first-class passengers for dinner after his rescue of Rose, Guggenheim refers to him as a bohemian. He is seen in the flooding grand staircase during the sinking, saying he is prepared to go down as a gentleman. Jonathan Evans-Jones as Wallace Hartley, the ship's bandmaster and violinist who plays uplifting music with his colleagues on the boat deck as the ship sinks. As the final plunge begins, he leads the band in a final performance of Nearer, My God, to Thee, to the tune of Bethany, and dies in the sinking. Mark Lindsay Chapman as Chief Officer Henry Wilde, the ship's chief officer, who lets Cal on board a lifeboat because he has a child in his arms. Before he dies, he tries to get the boats to return to the sinking site to rescue passengers by blowing his whistle. After he freezes to death, Rose uses his whistle to attract the attention of 5th Officer Lowe, which leads to her rescue. Ewan Stewart as First Officer William Murdoch, the officer who is put in charge of the bridge on the night the ship struck the iceberg. During a rush for the lifeboats, Murdoch shoots Tommy Ryan, as well as another passenger, in a momentary panic, then commits suicide by shooting himself in the head. When Murdoch's nephew Scott saw the film, he objected to his uncle's portrayal as damaging to Murdoch's heroic reputation. A few months later, Fox Vice President Scott Neeson went to Dalbeattie, Scotland, where Murdoch lived, to deliver a personal apology, and also presented a £5,000 donation to Dalbeattie High School to boost the school's William Murdoch Memorial Prize. Cameron apologized on the DVD commentary, but stated that there were officers who fired gunshots to enforce the women and children first policy. According to Cameron, his depiction of Murdoch is that of an honorable man, not of a man gone bad or of a cowardly murderer. He added, "I'm not sure you'd find that same sense of responsibility and total devotion to duty today. This guy had half of his lifeboats launched before his counterpart on the port side had even launched one. That says something about character and heroism." Jonathan Phillips as Second Officer Charles Lightoller. Lightoller took charge of the port side evacuation. The film depicts Lightoller informing Captain Smith that it will be difficult to see icebergs without breaking water, and following the collision, suggesting the crew should begin boarding women and children to the lifeboats. He is seen brandishing a gun and threatening to use it to keep order. He can be seen on top of collapsible B when the first funnel collapses. Lightoller was the most senior officer to have survived the disaster. Simon Crane as Fourth Officer Joseph Boxhall, the officer in charge of firing flares and manning Lifeboat 2 during the sinking. He is shown on the bridge wings helping the seamen firing the flares. Eoin Griffith as Fifth Officer Harold Lowe, the ship's only officer to lead a lifeboat to retrieve survivors of the sinking from the icy waters. The film depicts Lowe rescuing Rose. Edward Fletcher as Sixth Officer James Moody, the ship's only junior officer to have died in the sinking. The film depicts Moody admitting Jack and Fabrizio onto the ship only moments before it departs from Southampton. Moody is later shown following Mr. Murdoch's orders to put the ship to full speed ahead, and informs First Officer Murdoch about the iceberg. He is last seen clinging to one of the davits on the starboard side after having unsuccessfully attempted to launch collapsible A. James Lancaster as Father Thomas Biles, second-class passenger. Father Biles, a Catholic priest from England, is portrayed praying and consoling passengers during the ship's final moments. Lou Poulter and Elsa Raven as Isidore Strauss and Ida Strauss. Isidore is a former owner of R.H. Macy & Company, a former congressman from New York, and a member of the New York and New Jersey Bridge Commission. During the sinking, his wife Ida is offered a place in a lifeboat, but refuses, saying that she will honor her wedding pledge by staying with Isidore. They are last seen lying on their bed embracing each other as water fills their stateroom. Martin Jarvis as Sir Cosmo Duff Gordon, a Scottish baronet who is rescued in Lifeboat 1. Lifeboats 1 and 2 were emergency boats with a capacity of 40. Situated at the forward end of the boat deck, these were kept ready to launch in case of a person falling overboard. On the night of the disaster, Lifeboat 1 was the fourth to be launched, with 12 people aboard, including Duff Gordon, his wife and her secretary. The baronet was much criticized for his conduct during the incident. It was suggested that he had boarded the emergency boat in violation of the Women and Children First policy, and that the boat had failed to return to rescue those struggling in the water. He offered £5 to each of the lifeboat's crew, which those critical of his conduct viewed as a bribe. The Duff Gordons at the time stated that there had been no women or children waiting to board in the vicinity of the launching of their boat. There is confirmation that Lifeboat 1 of the Titanic was almost empty, and that First Officer William Murdoch was apparently glad to offer Duff Gordon and his wife and her secretary a place after they had asked if they could get on. Duff Gordon denied that his offer of money to the lifeboat crew represented a bribe. The British Board of Trade's inquiry into the disaster accepted Duff Gordon's denial of bribing the crew, but maintained that, if the emergency boat had rowed towards the people who were in the water, it might very well have been able to rescue some of them. Rosalind Ayres as Lady Duff Gordon, a world-famous fashion designer and Sir Cosmo's wife. She is rescued in Lifeboat 1 with her husband. They never lived down rumors that they had forbidden the lifeboat's crew to return to the wreck site in case they would be swamped. Rochelle Rose as Noelle Leslie, Countess of Roths. The Countess is shown to be friendly with Cal and the DeWitt Bouqueteurs. Despite being of a higher status in society than Sir Cosmo and Lady Duff Gordon, she is kind, and helps row the boat and even looks after the steerage passengers. Scott G. Anderson as Frederick Fleet, the lookout who saw the iceberg. Fleet escapes the sinking ship aboard Lifeboat 6. Paul Brightwell as Quartermaster Robert Hickens, one of the ship's 6 quartermasters and at the ship's wheel at the time of collision. He is in charge of Lifeboat 6. He refuses to go back and pick up survivors after the sinking and eventually the boat is commandeered by Molly Brown. Martin East as Reginald Lee, the other lookout in the crow's nest. He survives the sinking. Gregory Cook as Jack Phillips, senior wireless operator on board the Titanic whom Captain Smith ordered to send the distress signal. Craig Kelly as Harold Bride, junior wireless operator on board the Titanic. Liam Tuahi as Chief Baker Charles Juffin, the baker appears in the film helping Rose stand up after she falls, following her and Jack to the ship's stern, and finally hanging onto the ship's railing as it sinks, drinking brandy from a flask. According to the real Juffin's testimony, he rowed the ship down and stepped into the water without getting his hair wet. He also admitted to hardly feeling the cold, most likely thanks to alcohol. In a deleted scene, he's shown throwing deck chairs overboard before taking a drink from his bottle. Terry Forrestal as Chief Engineer Joseph G. Bell. Bell and his men worked until the last minute to keep the lights and the power on in order for distress signals to get out. Bell and all of the engineers died in the bowels of the Titanic. Cameos. Several crew members of the academic Mstislav Keldysh appear in the film, including Anatoly Sogalevich, creator and pilot of the Mir self-propelled deep submergence vehicle. Anders Falk, who filmed a documentary about the film sets for the Titanic Historical Society, makes a cameo appearance in the film as a Swedish immigrant whom Jack Dawson meets when he enters his cabin, Edward Kamuta and Karen Kamuta, then president and vice president of the society, who served as film consultants, were cast as extras in the film. Pre-production. Writing and inspiration. James Cameron has long had a fascination with shipwrecks, and for him the RMS Titanic was the Mount Everest of shipwrecks. He was almost past the point in his life when he felt he could consider an undersea expedition, but said he still had a mental restlessness to live the life he had turned away from when he switched from the sciences to the arts in college. So when an IMAX film was made from footage shot of the wreck itself, he decided to seek Hollywood funding to pay for an expedition and do the same thing. "It was not because I particularly wanted to make the movie," Cameron said. "I wanted to dive to the shipwreck." Cameron wrote a scriptment for a Titanic film, met with 20th Century Fox executives including Peter Chernin, and pitched it as Romeo and Juliet on the Titanic. Cameron stated, "They were like, a 3-hour romantic epic. Sure, that's just what we want. Is there a little bit of Terminator in that? Any Harrier jets, shootouts, or car chases?" I said, "No, no, no. It's not like that." The studio was dubious about the idea's commercial prospects, but, hoping for a long-term relationship with Cameron, they gave him a green light. Cameron convinced Fox to promote the film based on the publicity afforded by shooting the Titanic wreck itself, and organized several dives to the site over a period of 2 years. "My pitch on that had to be a little more detailed," said Cameron. "So I said, look, we've got to do this whole opening where they're exploring the Titanic and they find the diamond, so we're going to have all these shots of the ship." Cameron stated, "Now, we can either do them with elaborate models and motion control shots and CG and all that, which will cost X amount of money, or we can spend X plus 30% and actually go shoot it at the real wreck." The crew shot at the real wreck in the Atlantic Ocean 12 times in 1995. At that depth, with a water pressure of 6,000 pounds per square inch, one small flaw in the vessel's superstructure would mean instant death for all on board. Not only were the dives high risk, but adverse conditions prevented Cameron from getting the high-quality footage that he wanted. During one dive, one of the submersibles collided with Titanic's hull, damaging both sub and ship, and leaving fragments of the submersible's propeller shroud scattered around the superstructure. The external bulkhead of Captain Smith's quarters collapsed, exposing the interior. The area around the entrance to the grand staircase was also damaged. Descending to the actual site made both Cameron and crew want to live up to that level of reality. But there was another level of reaction coming away from the real wreck, which was that it wasn't just a story, it wasn't just a drama, he said. It was an event that happened to real people who really died. Working around the wreck for so much time, you get such a strong sense of the profound sadness and injustice of it, and the message of it. Cameron stated, "You think, there probably aren't going to be many filmmakers who go to Titanic. There may never be another one, maybe a documentarian." Due to this, he felt a great mantle of responsibility to convey the emotional message of it, to do that part of it right. 2. After filming the underwater shots, Cameron began writing the screenplay. He wanted to honor the people who died during the sinking, so he spent 6 months researching all of the Titanic's crew and passengers. "I read everything I could. I created an extremely detailed timeline of the ship's few days and a very detailed timeline of the last night of its life," he said. "And I worked within that to write the script, and I got some historical experts to analyze what I'd written and comment on it, and I adjusted it." He paid meticulous attention to detail, even including a scene depicting the Californian's role in Titanic's demise, though this was later cut. From the beginning of the shoot, they had a very clear picture of what happened on the ship that night. "I had a library that filled one whole wall of my writing office with Titanic stuff," because I wanted it to be right, especially if we were going to dive to the ship," he said. That set the bar higher in a way. It elevated the movie in a sense. "We wanted this to be a definitive visualization of this moment in history, as if you'd gone back in a time machine and shot it." Cameron was influenced in his crafting of the film by the 1958 British production A Night to Remember, which he had seen as a youth. He liberally copied some dialogue and scenes from that film, including the lively party of the passengers in steerage, and the musicians playing on the deck during the sinking of the ship. Cameron felt the Titanic sinking was like a great novel that really happened, but that the event had become a mere morality tale. The film would give audiences the experience of living the history. The treasure hunter Brock Lovett represented those who never connected with the human element of the tragedy, while the blossoming romance of Jack and Rose, Cameron believed, would be the most engaging part of the story. When their love is finally destroyed, the audience would mourn the loss. He said, "All my films are love stories, but in Titanic I finally got the balance right. It's not a disaster film. It's a love story with a fastidious overlay of real history." Cameron framed the romance with the elderly Rose to make the intervening years palpable and poignant. While Winslet and Stewart stated their belief that, instead of being asleep in her bed, the character dies at the end of the film, Cameron said that he would rather not reveal what he intended with the ending because his answer has to be something you supply personally, individually. Scale modeling. Harland and Wolff, the RMS Titanic's builders, opened their private archives to the crew, sharing blueprints that were thought lost. For the ship's interiors, production designer Peter Lamont's team looked for artifacts from the era. The newness of the ship meant every prop had to be made from scratch. Fox acquired 40 acres of waterfront south of Playas de Rosarito in Mexico, and began building a new studio on May 31, 1996. A Horizon tank of 17 million gallons was built for the exterior of the reconstructed ship, providing 270 degrees of ocean view. The ship was built to full scale, but Lamont removed redundant sections on the superstructure and forward well deck for the ship to fit in the tank, with the remaining sections filled with digital models. The lifeboats and funnels were shrunken by 10%. The boat deck and A deck were working sets, but the rest of the ship was just steel plating. Within was a 50-foot lifting platform for the ship to tilt during the sinking sequences. The 60-foot 1/8 scale model of the stern section was designed by naval architect J. Cantilla utilizing plans of the Titanic's sister ship RMS Olympic. Towering above was a 162-foot tall tower crane on 600 feet of rail track acting American Samoa, a combined construction, lighting, and camera platform. The sets representing the interior rooms of the Titanic were reproduced exactly as originally built, using photographs and plans from the Titanic's builders. The grand staircase, which features prominently in the film, was recreated to a high standard of authenticity, though it was widened 30% compared to the original and reinforced with steel girders. Craftsmen from Mexico and Britain sculpted the ornate paneling and plaster work based on Titanic's original designs. The carpeting, upholstery, individual pieces of furniture, light fixtures, chairs, cutlery, and crockery with the White Star Line crest on each piece were among the objects recreated according to original designs. Cameron additionally hired 2 Titanic historians, Don Lynch and Ken Marshall, to authenticate the historical detail in the film. Production. Principal photography for Titanic began on July 31, 1996 at Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, with the filming of the modern-day expedition scenes aboard the academic Mstislav Keldysh. In September 1996, the production moved to the newly built Fox Baja Studios in Rosarito, Mexico, where a full-scale RMS Titanic had been constructed. The poop deck was built on a hinge which could rise from 0 to 90 degrees in a few seconds, just as the ship's stern rose during the sinking. For the safety of the stuntmen, many props were made of foam rubber. By November 15, the boarding scenes were being shot. Cameron chose to build his RMS Titanic on the starboard side as a study of weather data revealed it was a prevailing north-to-south wind which blew the funnel smoke aft. This posed a problem for shooting the ship's departure from Southampton, as it was docked on its port side. Implementation of written directions, as well as props and costumes, had to be reversed. For example, if someone walked to their right in the script, they had to walk left during shooting. In post-production, the film was flipped to the correct direction. A full-time etiquette coach was hired to instruct the cast in the manners of the upper-class gentility in 1912. Despite this, several critics picked up on anachronisms in the film, not least involving the two main stars. Cameron sketched Jack's nude portrait of Rose for a scene which he feels has the backdrop of repression. "You know what it means for her, the freedom she must be feeling. It's kind of exhilarating for that reason," he said. The nude scene was DiCaprio and Winslet's first scene together. "It wasn't by any kind of design, although I couldn't have designed it better. There's a nervousness and an energy and a hesitance in them," Cameron stated. They had rehearsed together, but they hadn't shot anything together. "If I'd had a choice, I probably would have preferred to put it deeper into the body of the shoot." Cameron said he and his crew were just trying to find things to shoot because the big set wasn't ready for months, so we were scrambling around trying to fill in anything we could get to shoot. After seeing the scene on film, Cameron felt it worked out considerably well. Other times on the set were not as smooth. The shoot was an arduous experience that cemented Cameron's formidable reputation as the scariest man in Hollywood. He became known as an uncompromising, hard-charging perfectionist and a 300-decibel screamer, a modern-day Captain Bligh with a megaphone and walkie-talkie, swooping down into people's faces on a 162-feet crane. Winslet chipped a bone in her elbow during filming and had been worried that she would drown in the 17-gallon water tank in which the ship was to be sunk. "There were times when I was genuinely frightened of him. Jim has a temper like you wouldn't believe," she said. "God damn it," he would yell at some poor crew member, "that's exactly what I didn't want." Her co-star, Bill Paxton, was familiar with Cameron's work ethic from his earlier experience with him. "There were a lot of people on the set. Jim is not one of those guys who has the time to win hearts and minds," he said. The crew felt Cameron had an evil alter ego and so nicknamed him Midge. In response to the criticism, Cameron stated, "Filmmaking is war. A great battle between business and aesthetics." During the academic Mstislav Keldysh shoot in Canada, an angry crew member put the dissociative drug PCP into the soup that Cameron and various others ate one night in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. It sent more than 50 people to the hospital, including Paxton. There were people just rolling around, completely out of it. "Some of them said they were seeing streaks and psychedelics," said actor Louis Abernathy. Cameron managed to vomit before the drug took a full hold. Abernathy was shocked at the way he looked. One eye was completely red, like the Terminator eye. A pupil, no iris, beet red. The other eye looked like he'd been sniffing glue since he was 4. The person behind the poisoning was never caught. The filming schedule was intended to last 138 days but grew to 160. Many cast members came down with colds, flu, or kidney infections after spending hours in cold water, including Winslet. In the end, she decided she would not work with Cameron again unless she earned a lot of money. Several others left the production, and 3 stuntmen broke their bones, but the Screen Actors Guild decided, following an investigation, that nothing was inherently unsafe about the set. Additionally, DiCaprio said there was no point when he felt he was in danger during filming. Cameron believed in a passionate work ethic and never apologized for the way he ran his sets, although he acknowledged, "I'm demanding, and I'm demanding on my crew." In terms of being kind of Milita-esque, I think there's an element of that in dealing with thousands of extras and big logistics and keeping people safe. I think you have to have a fairly strict methodology in dealing with a large number of people. The costs of filming Titanic eventually began to mount and finally reached $200 million, a bit over $1 million per minute of screen time. Fox executives panicked and suggested an hour of specific cuts from the 3-hour film. They argued the extended length would mean fewer showings, thus less revenue, even though long epics are more likely to help directors win Oscars. Cameron refused, telling Fox, "You want to cut my movie? You're going to have to fire me. You want to fire me? You're going to have to kill me." The executives did not want to start over, because it would mean the loss of their entire investment, but they also initially rejected Cameron's offer of forfeiting his share of the profits as an empty gesture, as they predicted profits would be unlikely. Cameron explained forfeiting his share as complex. The short version is that the film cost proportionally much more than T2 and True Lies. Those films went up 7 or 8% from the initial budget. Titanic also had a large budget to begin with, but it went up a lot more, he said. "As the producer and director, I take responsibility for the studio that's writing the checks, so I made it less painful for them. I did that on 2 different occasions. They didn't force me to do it, they were glad that I did." Post-production effects. Cameron wanted to push the boundary of special effects with his film, and enlisted Digital Domain and Pacific Data Images to continue the developments in digital technology which the director pioneered while working on The Abyss and Terminator 2, Judgment Day. Many previous films about the RMS Titanic shot water in slow motion, which did not look wholly convincing. Cameron encouraged his crew to shoot their 45-foot-long miniature of the ship as if we're making a commercial for the White Star Line. Afterwards, digital water and smoke were added, as were extras captured on a motion capture stage. Visual effects supervisor Rob Legato scanned the faces of many actors, including himself and his children, for the digital extras and stuntmen. There was also a 65-foot-long model of the ship's stern that could break in two repeatedly, the only miniature to be used in water. For scenes set in the ship's engines, footage of the SS Jeremiah O'Brien's engines were composited with miniature support frames, and actors shot against a green screen. In order to save money, the first-class lounge was a miniature set incorporated into a green screen backdrop behind the actors. The miniature of the lounge would later be crushed to simulate the destruction of the room, and a scale model of a first-class corridor flooded with jets of water while the camera pans out. An enclosed 5,000,000 US gallon tank was used for sinking interiors, in which the entire set could be tilted into the water. In order to sink the grand staircase, 90,000 US gallons of water were dumped into the set as it was lowered into the tank. Unexpectedly, the waterfall ripped the staircase from its steel-reinforced foundations, although no one was hurt. The 744-foot-long exterior of the RMS Titanic had its first half lowered into the tank, but as the heaviest part of the ship it acted as a shock absorber against the water. To get the set into the water, Cameron had much of the set emptied and even smashed some of the promenade windows himself. After submerging the dining saloon, 3 days were spent shooting Lovett's ROV traversing the wreck in the present. The post-sinking scenes in the freezing Atlantic were shot in a 350,000 US gallon tank, where the frozen corpses were created by applying on actors a powder that crystallized when exposed to water, and wax was coated on hair and clothes. The climactic scene, which features the breakup of the ship directly before it sinks as well as its final plunge to the bottom of the Atlantic, involved a tilting full-sized set, 150 extras, and 100 stunt performers. Cameron criticized previous Titanic films for depicting the liner's final plunge as a graceful slide underwater. He wanted to depict it as the terrifyingly chaotic event that it really was. When carrying out the sequence, people needed to fall off the increasingly tilting deck, plunging hundreds of feet below and bouncing off of railings and propellers on the way down. A few attempts to film this sequence with stunt people resulted in some minor injuries, and Cameron halted the more dangerous stunts. The risks were eventually minimized by using computer-generated people for the dangerous falls. A Linux-based operating system was utilized for the creation of the effects. Editing. There was one crucial historical fact Cameron chose to omit from the film. The SS Californian was close to the Titanic the night she sank but had turned off its radio for the night, did not hear her crew's SOS calls, and did not respond to their distress flares. Yes, the Californian. That wasn't a compromise to mainstream filmmaking. That was really more about emphasis, creating an emotional truth to the film, stated Cameron. He said there were aspects of retelling the sinking that seemed important in pre- and post-production, but turned out to be less important as the film evolved. The story of the Californian was in there. We even shot a scene of them switching off their Marconi radio set, said Cameron. But I took it out. It was a clean cut, because it focuses you back onto that world. If Titanic is powerful as a metaphor, as a microcosm, for the end of the world in a sense, then that world must be self-contained. During the first assembly cut, Cameron altered the planned ending, which had given resolution to Brock Lovett's story. In the original version of the ending, Brock and Lizzie see the elderly Rose at the stern of the boat and fear she is going to commit suicide. Rose then reveals that she had the Heart of the Ocean diamond all along but never sold it, in order to live on her own without Cal's money. She tells Brock that life is priceless and throws the diamond into the ocean, after allowing him to hold it. After accepting that treasure is worthless, Brock laughs at his stupidity. Rose then goes back to her cabin to sleep, whereupon the film ends in the same way as the final version. In the editing room, Cameron decided that by this point, the audience would no longer be interested in Brock Lovett and cut the resolution to his story, so that Rose is alone when she drops the diamond. He also did not want to disrupt the audience's melancholy after the Titanic's sinking. Paxton agreed that his scene with Brock's epiphany and laugh was unnecessary, stating that I would have shot heroin to make the scene work better. You didn't really need anything from us. Our job was done by then. If you're smart and you take the ego and the narcissism out of it, you'll listen to the film, and the film will tell you what it needs and what it does not need. The version used for the first test screening featured a fight between Jack and Lovejoy which takes place after Jack and Rose escape into the flooded dining saloon, but the test audiences disliked it. The scene was written to give the film more suspense, and featured Cal offering to give Lovejoy, his valet, the heart of the ocean if he can get it from Jack and Rose. Lovejoy goes after the pair in the sinking first-class dining room. Just as they are about to escape him, Lovejoy notices Rose's hand slap the water as it slips off the table behind which she is hiding. In revenge for framing him for the theft of the necklace, Jack attacks him and smashes his head against a glass window, which explains the gash on Lovejoy's head that can be seen when he dies in the completed version of the film. In their reactions to the scene, test audiences said it would be unrealistic to risk one's life for wealth, and Cameron cut it for this reason, as well as for timing and pacing reasons. Many other scenes were cut for similar reasons. Music and soundtrack. Cameron wrote Titanic while listening to the work of Irish New Age musician Enya. He offered Enya the chance to compose for the film, but she declined. Cameron instead chose James Horner to compose the film's score. The two had parted ways after a tumultuous working experience on Aliens, but Titanic cemented a successful collaboration that lasted until Horner's death. For the vocals heard throughout the film, Subsequently described by Earl Hitchner of the Wall Street Journal as evocative, Horner chose Norwegian singer Sissel Kyrkjebø, commonly known as Sissel. Horner knew Sissel from her album Innerstichelen, and he particularly liked how she sang E.g. Veit I Himmerik I Borg. He had tried 25 or 30 singers before he finally chose Sissel as the voice to create specific moods within the film. Horner additionally wrote the song My Heart Will Go On in secret with Will Jennings because Cameron did not want any songs with singing in the film. Celine Dion agreed to record a demo with the persuasion of her husband René Angelo. Horner waited until Cameron was in an appropriate mood before presenting him with the song. After playing it several times, Cameron declared his approval, although worried that he would have been criticized for going commercial at the end of the movie. Cameron also wanted to appease anxious studio executives and saw that a hit song from his movie could only be a positive factor in guaranteeing its completion. Heart of the Ocean. For the Heart of the Ocean design, London-based jewelers Asprey and Gerard used cubic zirconia set in white gold to create an Edwardian-style necklace to be used as a prop in the film. Asprey and Gerard produced and designed the necklaces. The result was 3 different and unique designs. 2 of their designs were used in the film while the other went unused until after the film had been released. The 3 necklaces are commonly known as the original prop, the J. Peterman necklace, and the Asprey necklace. The 3 necklaces are all very similar but have distinguishable differences. The third and final design was not used in the film. After the film's success, Asprey and Gerard were commissioned to create an authentic Heart of the Ocean necklace using the original design. The result was a platinum set, 171-carat heart-shaped Ceylon sapphire surrounded by 103 diamonds. This design featured a much larger inverted pear-shaped Ceylon sapphire with a subtle cleft to resemble a heart. The chain for this necklace also featured a mix of round, pear, and marquise-cut white diamonds. The bail also featured a heart-cut white diamond with another round-cut diamond attached to an inverted pear-shaped diamond which was then attached to the cage of the main stone. The necklace was donated to Sotheby's auction house in Beverly Hills for an auction benefiting the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund and Southern California's Aid for AIDS. It was sold to an unidentified Asprey client for $1.4 million, under the agreement that Celine Dion would wear it 2 nights later at the 1998 Academy Awards ceremony. This necklace has since not been made available for public viewing. Release and reception. Initial screening. 20th Century Fox and Paramount Pictures co-financed Titanic, with Paramount handling the North American distribution and Fox handling the international release. They expected Cameron to complete the film for a release on July 2, 1997. The film was to be released on this date to exploit the lucrative summer season ticket sales when blockbuster films usually do better. In April, Cameron said the film's special effects were too complicated and that releasing the film for summer would not be possible. With production delays, Paramount pushed back the release date to December 19, 1997. This fueled speculation that the film itself was a disaster. A preview screening in Minneapolis on July 14 generated positive reviews and chatter on the internet was responsible for more favorable word of mouth about This eventually led to more positive media coverage. The film premiered on November 1, 1997, at the Tokyo International Film Festival, where reaction was described as tepid by the New York Times. Positive reviews started to appear back in the United States. The official Hollywood premiere occurred on December 14, 1997, where the big movie stars who attended the opening were enthusiastically gushing about the film to the world media. Box office. Including revenue from the 2012 and 2017 reissues, Titanic earned $659.4 million in North America and $1.812 billion in other countries, for a worldwide total of $2.195 billion. It became the highest-grossing film of all time worldwide in 1998, beating Jurassic Park. The film remained so for 12 years, until Avatar, also written and directed by Cameron, surpassed it in 2010. On March 1, 1998, it became the first film to earn more than $1 billion worldwide, and on the weekend April 13-15, 2012, a century after the original vessel's foundering, Titanic became the second film to cross the $2 billion threshold during its 3D re-release. Box Office Mojo estimates that Titanic is the fifth highest-grossing film of all time in North America when adjusting for ticket price inflation. The site also estimates that the film sold over 128 million tickets in the US in its initial theatrical run. Titanic was the first foreign-language film to succeed in India, which claims to have the largest movie-going audience in the world. A Hindustan Times report attributes this to the film's similarities and shared themes with most Bollywood films. Initial theatrical run. Commercial analysis. Critical reception. Initial. Retrospective. Accolades. Titanic began its awards sweep starting with the Golden Globes, winning 4, Best Motion Picture Drama, Best Director, Best Original Score, and Best Original Song. Kate Winslet and Gloria Stewart were also nominees. The film garnered 14 Academy Award nominations, tying the record set in 1950 by Joseph L. Mankiewicz's All About Eve, and won 11, Best Picture, Best Director, Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, Best Visual Effects, Best Film Editing, Best Costume Design, Best Sound, Best Sound Effects Editing, Best Original Dramatic Score, Best Original Song. Kate Winslet, Gloria Stewart, and the makeup artists were the three nominees that did not win, ultimately losing to Helen Hunt in As Good as It Gets, Kim Basinger in L.A. Confidential, and Men in Black simultaneously. James Cameron's original screenplay and Leonardo DiCaprio were not nominees. It was the second film to receive 11 Academy Awards, after Ben-Hur. The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King would also match this record in 2004. Titanic won the 1997 Academy Award for Best Original Song, as well as 4 Grammy Awards for Record of the Year, Song of the Year, Best Song Written Specifically for a Motion Picture or Television, and Best Female Pop Vocal Performance. The film's soundtrack became the best-selling primarily orchestral soundtrack of all time, and became a worldwide success, spending 16 weeks at number 1 in the United States, and was certified diamond for over 11 million copies sold in the United States alone. The soundtrack also became the best-selling album of 1998 in the US. My Heart Will Go On won the Grammy Awards for Best Song Written Specifically for a Motion Picture or for Television. The film also won various awards outside the United States, including the awards of the Japanese Academy as the Best Foreign Film of the Year. Titanic eventually won nearly 90 awards and had an additional 47 nominations from various award-giving bodies around the world. Additionally, the book about the making of the film was at the top of the New York Times bestseller list for several weeks, the first time that such a tie-in book had achieved this status. Since its release, Titanic has appeared on the American Film Institute's award-winning 100 Years series. So far, it has ranked on the following 6 lists. Home media. Titanic was released worldwide in widescreen and pan and scan formats on VHS on September 1, 1998. More than $50 million was spent to market the home video release of the film. Both VHS formats were also made available in a deluxe boxed gift set with a mounted film strip and 6 lithograph prints from the movie. In the first 3 months, the film sold 25 million copies in North America with a total sales value of $500 million, becoming the best-selling live-action video, beating Independence Day. In that time, it sold 58 million copies worldwide, outselling The Lion King for a total worldwide revenue of $995 million. By March 2005, the film has sold 8 million DVD and 59 million VHS units. In the United Kingdom, the film sold 1.1 million copies on its first day of release, making it the country's fastest-selling home video release. It would achieve this record until it was surpassed by Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone in May 2002, when that film sold 1.2 million home video units during its first day. Within the first week of release, Titanic quickly beat the Full Monty, selling a total of 1.8 million home video copies. A DVD version was released on August 31, 1999, in a widescreen-only single-disc edition with no special features other than a theatrical trailer. Cameron stated at the time that he intended to release a special edition with extra features later. This release became the best-selling DVD of 1999 and early 2000, becoming the first DVD ever to sell 1 million copies. At the time, less than 5% of all U.S. homes had a DVD player. When we released the original Titanic DVD, the industry was much smaller, and bonus features were not the standard they are now, said Megan Burrows, Paramount's president of domestic home entertainment, which made the film's DVD performance even more impressive. Titanic was re-released to DVD on October 25, 2005, when a 3-disc special collector's edition was made available in the United States and Canada. This edition contained a newly restored transfer of the film, a 6.1 DTZES discrete surround sound mix, and various special features. In PAL regions, 2-disc and 4-disc variants were released, marketed as the Special Edition and Deluxe Collector's Edition respectively. They were released in the United Kingdom on November 7, 2005. A limited 5-disc set of the film, under the title Deluxe Limited Edition, was also only released in the United Kingdom with only 10,000 copies manufactured. The 5th disc contains Cameron's documentary Ghosts of the Abyss, which was distributed by Walt Disney Pictures. Unlike the individual release of Ghosts of the Abyss, which contained 2 discs, only the first disc was included in the set. In 2007, for the film's 10th anniversary, a 10th anniversary edition was released on DVD, which consists of the first 2 discs from the 3-disc 2005 set containing the movie and the special features on those discs. The film was released on Blu-ray and Blu-ray 3D on September 10, 2012. The 3D presentation of the film is split over 2 discs and is also THX certified. Special features on another disc included many of those featured on the 2005 Special Collector's Edition DVD, along with 2 new documentaries titled Reflections on Titanic and Titanic, The Final Word with James Cameron. The latter aired on National Geographic on April 9, 2012 and was executively produced by Cameron. 3D conversion. A 2012 3D re-release was created by remastering the original to 4K resolution and post-converting to stereoscopic 3D format. The Titanic 3D version took 60 weeks and $18 million to produce, including the 4K restoration. The 3D conversion was performed by Stereo D Digital 2D, and in 2D IMAX versions were also struck from the new 4K master created in the process. The only scene entirely redone for the re-release was Rose's view of the night sky at sea on the morning of April 15, 1912. The scene was replaced with an accurate view of the night sky star pattern, including the Milky Way, adjusted for the location in the North Atlantic Ocean in April 1912. The change was prompted by astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, who had criticized the scene for showing an unrealistic star pattern. He agreed to send film director Cameron a corrected view of the sky, which was the basis of the new scene. The 3D version of Titanic premiered at the Royal Albert Hall in London on March 27, 2012, with James Cameron and Kate Winslet in attendance, and entered general release on April 4, 2012, 6 days shy of the centenary of RMS Titanic embarking on her maiden voyage. Rolling Stone film critic Peter Travers rated the reissue 3+1 stars out of 4, explaining he found it pretty damn dazzling. He said, "The 3D intensifies Titanic. You are there, caught up like never before in an intimate epic that earns its place in the movie time capsule." Writing for Entertainment Weekly, Owen Gleiberman gave the film an A grade. He wrote, "For once, the visuals in a 3D movie don't look darkened or distracting. They look sensationally crisp and alive." Richard Corliss of Time, who was very critical in 1997, remained in the same mood. "I had pretty much the same reaction, fitfully odd, mostly waterlogged." In regards to the 3D effects, he noted the careful conversion to 3D lens volume and impact to certain moments. In separating the foreground and background of each scene, the converters have carved the visual field into discrete, not organic, levels. Anne Hornaday for The Washington Post found herself asking whether the film's twin values of humanism and spectacle are enhanced by Cameron's 3D conversion, and the answer to that is, they aren't. She further added that the 3D conversion creates distance where there should be intimacy, not to mention odd moments in framing and composition. The film grossed an estimated $4.7 million on the first day of its re-release in North America and went on to make $17.3 million over the weekend, finishing in third place. Outside North America it earned $35.2 million, finishing second, and it improved on its performance the following weekend by topping the box office with $98.9 million. China has proven to be its most successful territory, where it earned $11.6 million on its opening day, going on to earn a record-breaking $67 million in its opening week and taking more money in the process than it did in the entirety of its original theatrical run. The reissue ultimately earned $343.4 million worldwide, with $145 million coming from China and $57.8 million from Canada and the United States. With a worldwide box office of nearly $350 million, the 3D re-release of Titanic remains the highest-grossing re-released film of all time, ahead of The Lion King, Star Wars, and Avatar. The 3D conversion of the film was also released in the 4DX format in selected international territories, which allows the audience to experience the film's environment. Using motion, wind, fog, lighting, and scent-based special effects. For the 20th anniversary of the film, Titanic was re-released in cinemas in Dolby Vision for 1 week beginning December 1, 2017. Titanic will return to theaters on February 10, 2023, in a remastered 3D 4K HDR render, with high frame rate, as part of the film's 25th anniversary. Titanic Live/I. None. Merchandise. A board game based on the film, titled Titanic, the game, was released in 2020 by Spin Master Games. See also: List of Academy Award records. Titanic, music from the motion picture.